So you know that feeling of soul-crushing despair that cripples your spirit and starts you reaching for the razor blades? Yeah, I have that feeling every morning. I hate mornings. I mean, I've never exactly been fond of them. Having to wake up early and groggily prepare yourself for a day of enduring a job you detest, surrounded by people you can't stand. But that was a vacation in the Poconos compared to what I've been waking up to recently. The thing is, if you don't find a safe enough spot to camp, you wake up surrounded by those cold, glassy, sunken eyes that'll wake you up faster than a Red Bull laced with cocaine. If you're lucky, there'll only be about 4 sets of them. If you're very lucky, there'll be less than 3. Anything more than 5, best to reach for those razor blades again. This morning, I woke up in an abandoned, sky blue hatchback that appeared to have lost a game of chicken against a billboard for a sex shop located just off the next exit ramp. Maybe the driver got distracted by the voluptuous blonde model. Got me thinking, how in a post-apocalyptic world those foxy starlets you see 10 feet tall in the highway advertisements seem to live on with greater appreciation than anyone who ever authored a best-selling novel or scientific journal. Anyway, I'm getting off track. When the dawn irretrievably coaxed me awake, like an hungover, overweight ex-wife, I opened the back of the hatchback. There was one standing there, a few feet away, still as a stone, silent as a shadow, just staring at me. Only one of them this morning, which made me very lucky. In fact, it was my equivalent of waking up to find a $50 bill on the pillow. This one was kind of short and squat with a beer gut and quite a bit of shoulder hair. No wonder he hadn't been able to outrun them. It looked like the only reason he ever got off the couch in life was to collect the welfare check. I picked up my trusty hockey stick blade and charged him, and with a single swipe, I severed enough of his neck so that his head lobbed over sideways and bounced off his own shoulder, coming to rest upside down against his back, dangling by a raw flap of bloody flesh. He hit the ground like a bag of silicone implants, and I went through his sweatpants pockets as the body shook for a moment while he bled out. Ironically enough, there was a lottery ticket in his waistband. I remember a time when they may have been worth something. Okay, let me start from the beginning. I'm Otis Black, which is absolutely not my real name. I figured since everybody who knew me is dead, I can afford to rename myself. I don't know exactly when and where it started. Some say secret lab in Nigeria. Others say Area 51. And even a few who say some guy's basement in Tokyo. My money's on aliens, personally. Whatever the outbreak was didn't reach Canada until December 2017. The Canadian National Guard had done a pretty decent job securing the borders against the stumbling, unblinking hordes. But then something unexpected happened. The hordes stopped stumbling and started running, then climbing, and finally overpowering. I don't know if they were ever given an official designated name before they broke through the barriers, but I've taken to calling them jackals, because they're decent hunters, are outrageously ugly, and because I had an ex named Jackie who cheated on me when I was at my mother's funeral. Seriously, fuck you, Jackie. Now, the thing you have to know about jackals is they're primarily pack hunters. They run like they're being chased by missiles, and they never blink. Let me reiterate that. They never blink. They can't afford to. That's how they expand their numbers. They look right into your soul and burn away everything that you had saved to your organic hard drive. essentially leaving you a walking shell. That's what makes them so dangerous. They don't need to physically make contact with you at all. Just a single careless second of eye contact is all it takes for them to hypnotize you into joining their passive-aggressive cult. And they don't need to be within arm's reach either. You make eye contact through binoculars, you're done. As far as I can tell, they don't seem to need to sleep, eat, or make intimate cuddly connections of any kind with other fellow jackals. Now, you're probably asking, but Otis, you just killed one. How did you do that without making eye contact? That's an excellent question. Now, put your hand down. How did I do it? I cheated. I have these welder's goggles that greatly minimize the strength of their gaze, and as long as I kill them quickly, I am in no serious danger. I've been able to dispatch as many as 3 of them several times relatively easily. Once, I successfully cut down 4 of them, but I wouldn't want to try that again. They don't just run at you in clusters. They spread themselves thin and come at you from all sides, but you can't just stand there with your eyes closed and wait for them to grab you because, well, they don't grab you. I mean, I suppose they could if they wanted to, but instead, they keep their distance, which leaves you with 2 options. A, try to blindly run and fight, or B, risk sneaking a peek. Neither is a good option, by the way. If you don't kill them, they'll just keep stalking you while gathering themselves in greater numbers. Best option? Find a spear or a blade with a long reach and some seriously dark shades. Any old pair of sunglasses won't cut it. You need something you can stare into the sun to for a solid minute or 2 and not blink. And before you ask, I always have the welder's glasses on, day and night, even when I sleep. I'm sure the tan line around my head is as pale as milk. I finished going through the bloated jackal's pockets and wiped the blood off the blade of my makeshift hockey stick scythe. To answer your next question, yes, the jackals are fairly easy to kill if you can actually see what you're doing. They're about as fragile as a normal man, though their tolerance for pain is considerably higher. You could shoot them, of course. There's a pesky issue of having to look at them to aim. Blindly lobbing grenades at them works, but I'm willing to bet it kills just as many innocent bystanders as it does bad guys. I decided to go with a more hands-on approach. I'm a Canadian welder, so naturally, I decided to weld a long, jagged metal blade on the business end of my hockey stick, like a traditional scythe, and wander the country along delivering death like the Grim Reaper. It's quite a fun irony, really. The jackals condemn you to seemingly eternal life, whereas I put them in the ground. Don't get me wrong. All the alone time can get irksome. It would be nice to have a cute little Mormon girl dancing down the road behind me playing the violin or something, but it's hard enough protecting oneself nowadays without having to protect any tagalongs. Besides, it would kind of ruin my whole Grim Reaper image. I threw my hood up, pulled my backpack out of the hatchback, and leaned the Reaper stick on my shoulder and started walking down the deserted road. For breakfast, I had to settle for another can of soggy pears. Yum. I glanced up at the blonde on the billboard one more time as my steel-toed boots stomped down heavily on the concrete, thinking that I may as well check out the sex shop since I'd be on the way. So, I'm minding my own business, walking down the middle of what used to be a parking lot, trying to brush my teeth with bottled water and whichever one of my fingers appears to be cleanest, when I hear rapidly approaching feet. Sounds like jackals are on the hunt and heading my way. I dropped the magazine I had found at the sex shop into a nearby trash can. Old habits, you know. And ducked down behind a sun-bleached minivan, still patiently awaiting a load of groceries. There were definitely more than 5 of them this time. My guess was at least 10 to 12 based on the thundering sound of several footfalls and enough snarling and growling to excite Michael Vick. I watched as about a dozen of them sprint past the parking lot from the direction I had been heading and turn down a side street. I suddenly felt insignificant. Kind of odd that they weren't tracking my scent. So who exactly were they hunting anyway? Carefully leaving the cover of my minivan shield, I jogged across the lot and was going to hop the fence and continue on my merry way, heading not far when I paused. The jackals began crying out in animalistic joy from not very far away. Whatever they were hunting, they had cornered it. Now, I'm by no means a hero, but curiosity is a bitch, and she started metaphorically tugging at me like an awkward teen at a bra strap, and suddenly I was heading in the direction of the clamor. It had been over 3 weeks since I had encountered anyone without glassy dead eyes, so I decided to see who or what the fuss was all about. I dashed across the street and crouched low, making myself as inconspicuous as possible. After another few yards, I discovered that stealth wasn't going to continue to be an option. The jackals had cornered something in one of those small public bathrooms in the middle of a wide open park. And there was so much wide open space to hope they wouldn't notice me approaching. The unblinking hellspawn had surrounded the small structure and were calling out like a demonic choir, meaning to attract more of their own. I could have picked up my poker chips and left the table right there before any undead players arrived, but I figured I was too invested in the situation now to leave the game prematurely. Besides, I was never one to back away from calling a bluff. There were too many to fight, but I wagered I could draw a few away. Picking up a fallen brick, I ran to the minivan in the grocery store parking lot and heaved the rectangular projectile directly at the windshield. There was a satisfying crunch as the glass buckled, but unfortunately wasn't loud enough to attract the attention I needed. If this thing were Maserati, an alarm likely would have sounded, but good luck finding one of those things in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Retrieving the brick, I shattered the driver's side window and lay on the horn for about 5 seconds, and sprinted back toward the alley. About 3 heartbeats after I found cover, 6 jackals came tearing into the parking lot like it was free candy day. They didn't make for the van, but instead just froze for several seconds and then started making their way towards me. They had my scent, which I suppose was a combination of sweat, soggy pears, and poor life choices. I heaved the brick again through a gas station window and ran back towards the direction of the park while the jackals made for the sound of the shattering glass. Much like putting on a condom, every second counted, and that distraction wouldn't fool them for long. When I sprinted towards the park bathroom, 3 were in plain sight, and I imagine the rest were likely around the far side of the building. The jackals froze, like marble statues, and tried to stare me down as I charged towards them. And with 3 precise swipes of my death stick, I cut them all down. I pounded on the door to the men's room. "Avon lady, open up!" No response from within. I pounded on the door to the women's room, still nothing. Suddenly, regretting my decision to get involved, I pounded harder on the door to the men's room one more time. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw 2 jackals had come from around the building and were boring holes into the back of my head with their gaze. their faces expressionless, their posture as rigid as stone. I swung my hockey stick twice more like I was harvesting wheat, but from beyond the grass I saw the other 6 sprinting back towards me. "Now's the time to renew your subscription. Please open the door so I don't have to kick it in." The door to the woman's room timidly opened a crack, and I shoved myself inside like a fat kid as a donut shop opened. I slammed the door behind me and locked the deadbolt. "Well, hard part's over," I sighed in relief. Then I heard the cocking of a gun's hammer right behind my head.
"Turn around, slowly,"
a quiet voice commanded. I obediently complied to find 2 kids who looked like they just shambled out of their high school graduation party staring back at me. A Colt revolver aimed at the dirty smudge between my eyes. The boy had long, sweaty, unkempt curls falling down past his ears, and a peach fuzz goatee, which likely would have gotten him bullied to the point of suicide had society not collapsed. The girl was short and petite, her eyes mostly hidden behind her dark bangs, the massive bulge in her stomach more obvious than a drowned rat in your coffee. But what was more concerning was the samurai sword she held out masterfully as though she were about to ritually execute me. I didn't blame them for their apprehension. After all, a 6-foot hooded bald guy with welder's goggles and blood dripping from his makeshift scythe and speckled in his Gandalf beard barges into my living room, I'd probably shoot him first and ask questions later. But these kids seemed intelligent enough to realize I may very well have been the lesser of 2 evils. Lucky for me. I decided to play it cool. "Hey there, Frodo. I'm going to pretend, for argument's sake, that gun is loaded. You shoot me with that thing, you'll probably fly backwards through the wall." To his credit, the kid didn't flinch.
"Who are you?"
I was tempted to give him my whole Grim Reaper spiel, but doubted that would go over well given the circumstances. "I'm Otis. How are the 3 of you doing this fine day?" The boy slowly lowered his gun halfway down.
"Not great. We got lost on our way to the hospital and had to take shelter here."
"Not a great choice." I spoke to him like a game show host would to a contestant who's losing his chance at the jackpot. "Too exposed. Only one exit."
"No shit."
The guy practically snarled.
"But she could barely walk another step."
At this, the girl slowly sat down on one of the toilets and kept a firm grip on the sword like it was her spear in shark-infested waters. "How far along is she?" I asked.
"Hard to keep track of time anymore.
The girl responded to me herself.
But I would say it was due about a week ago."
"Outstanding!" I clicked my tongue against my teeth, half sincere and half sarcastic. The boy finally lowered the gun completely, but kept his finger on the trigger.
"I'm Lyle, and she's Chloe. The baby's either Astrid or Cody."
"That's adorable. Now, is that thing actually loaded?" I nodded my head towards his hand cannon.
"Only 1 shot left."
Lyle replied grimly.
"We're trying to get to the hospital that's somewhere within a few miles of here. We heard a radio broadcast a few months back that they still had supplies and were operating in the basement."
"How have you managed to make it this far?" I asked with genuine astonishment. Lyle nodded towards Chloe.
"They can't turn her."
I looked over at Chloe, who raised her head and parted her bangs with her free hand. Her eyes were cloudy and gray. That's when it suddenly made sense to me. She was blind.
"We travel at night, cover ourselves with mud to mask our scent as best we can. We were originally in an underground bunker with 6 others, but we left on foot a month ago, knowing Chloe was eventually going to need a hospital."
I raised my eyebrow. "None of the other 6 offered to go with you?" Lyle's face went somber.
"One of them did."
There was a moment of tense silence. From outside the room I could hear the shuffling of feet and the occasional bark or snarl of the jackals as they circled the building. Finally, I spoke. "You guys hungry?" Chloe's head shot up.
Oh my god, always.
I took out my last 2 cans of pears and popped them open, handing one to each of them. Lyle gently took the sword from Chloe and set the second can in her other hand. "Now, I know what you're thinking. Otis, you said tag-alongs were a bad idea. Why are you helping them? You should leave while you can and make for the next sex shop. You know, you're probably not wrong. But fuck you anyway for suggesting it. Like it or not, I found myself invested in this situation. And if I left them behind to fend for themselves, well, realistically, I was likely adding at least one more jackal to the world, in Lyle's case, and leaving Chloe to die in agony during childbirth on a sticky bathroom floor if she didn't die of starvation first. And besides, I kind of admired their guts. I hate to pressure you two, but we can't stay here. Every moment that goes by gives more of those things a chance to surround us. Before long, there will be dozens out there."
Well, it's not like we can outrun them, exactly.
Lyle snapped. "So we're going to have to outthink them," I replied with a wink. "Not like they could see that through the goggles, of course. Does that sword work, or is it mostly for show?"
I could carve your Thanksgiving turkey with it. I've been practicing since I was 4.
Chloe raised her head and smirked. I gave her a skeptical look. "How do you know what you're swinging at?"
The smell.
She replied with a mouthful of peach. I shrugged. Who was I to judge? They had made it this far, after all. I started scanning the room for anything I could use to distract the horde of wailing, brain-dead meat sacks huffing and puffing outside. In a supply locker by the changing table, I found extra rolls of toilet paper, which was surprising to me. You'd think those would have been one of the first things to go extinct after the world ended. I glanced upwards. The ceiling was only a single layer of rigid sheet metal and a wooden frame. This was only a simple park restroom, after all, not designed for comfort, but rather just a quick pit stop out of the sun or rain. I found a hatch just above one of the stalls, which opened from the inside. I wasn't going to be able to fit through it, but Lyle easily could. "I have an idea," I spoke aloud. "I'm going to need that sword." I helped boost Lyle upwards through the hatch, and then handed the sword and the rolls of toilet paper up after him. I winced hard against the sunlight blazing down through the opening and shielded my face with my hands. I had been forced to let Lyle borrow my welder's goggles for the sake of our escape plan. It had actually hurt pretty badly when I removed them. They had been on so long it felt like I was peeling off a layer of skin. I could barely see the world around me anymore because of how bright it was. Actually, no. That's a lie. I was pretty much as blind as Chloe was. That being said, I decided to sit down next to her and play an awkward round of I Spy with her while we waited for Lyle above. From the bathroom door came a hard pounding, not the type of pounding like your psycho ex would do if she was angry and wanted back into your life, but the slow, patient, rhythmic pounding of something strong striking the door every few seconds, as if testing its strength or keeping you distracted until another way in could be discovered.
I thought they didn't get violent.
Chloe said in a grim voice that surprisingly wasn't very panicked. "They do if you make them impatient enough," I replied. "They must have gotten tired of staring at the door. They'll break it down eventually, but hopefully not before your baby daddy can get the job done."
Do you have any family?
Chloe asked. I have a pet rock back home. I chuckled.
I'm being serious.
Chloe's voice sounded hurt. I had a brother, I sighed and stroked my beard. We were heading south to North Dakota. I wanted to get across the border before winter hit us.
What happened to him?
Chloe asked after a few moments of silence broken by the pounding at the door. He got killed over a pair of shoes. I responded without emotion as I rested my hands on my knees. No, actually, it wasn't even a pair of shoes. It was a pair of shoelaces. He was removing them from the body of a dead jackal when some random dickless coward stabbed him from behind with a cracked stick of rebar and left him to die. I could have run after the guy and caught him, I suppose. But my brother was calling my name, so I stayed with him for over an hour until he finally bled out.
It's terrible. I'm so sorry.
Chloe whispered, perhaps upset she had asked the question.
Did you ever catch the guy?
I nodded, even though I knew the gesture was pointless. The first time I caught him, I broke his nose and cut off one of his ears and told him to run. I caught him again a day later. I broke both his hands with a brick and told him to run again.
Why?
Chloe asked, her voice sounding somewhere between amazed and appalled. When my brother died, I didn't see the point of going on. I decided to make that scumbag my purpose. I'd track him each day, hurt him some more when I eventually caught him, and kept letting him go so I could keep finding him again.
Did you eventually kill him?
Nope. Never found him again after the second time. I suppose technically I'm still hunting for him, but that was over a year ago. He's likely long dead by now. Or a very crippled jackal. But you know, in case he is out there, I keep on traveling. The door shook harder, as if more than one of them had put their weight into it this time. I heard Lyle climb down from the hatch overhead, and felt him return the welder's goggles into my outstretched hand. How did it go?
I got it started, but it'll take a few minutes. How did you see anything wearing those?
Out of necessity, I replied simply. Wrapping the goggles back around my head was nearly as painful as taking them off. I climbed on top of the toilet and peeked outside across the roof. Using a lighter I had found a while back, Lyle had slid the rolls of toilet paper down the sword blade and lit it on fire before using the sword to launch the burning roll into the nearby trees. It was late summer, and based on the ugly brown shade the grass had turned, I guess there hadn't been a sprinkle of rain any time recently. The flaming paper grenades had struck the trees several times, but unfortunately only one had become caught in the low-hanging branches, while the rest began to burn out upon the ground. Hopefully, one direct hit would be enough to get the job done. Once the tree goes up like a bonfire, most of them will be distracted enough for us to slip away. We'll cut through the stragglers and make our way out of here towards the hospital, and you two can relax until the baby's finally ready to crawl out.
There won't be any time to relax, unfortunately.
Chloe croaked from the corner. Oh, hell no. I winced when I noticed her lower body was soaked. Lyle ran over to her and held her tight.
My water just broke.
Chloe gasped.
The baby is coming.
I don't mean to ruin the moment, but the jackals will probably break in long before you're done. And even if the tree is still on fire afterwards, we can't exactly move stealthily with a wailing newborn in tow.
You mean we have to go now?
Lyle's voice squeaked like a virgin caught with a vibrator. Unless you'd like to shove your kid back up inside her when she's done. Lyle looked like he was in more discomfort than Chloe was. He looked up at me in desperation and alarm.
How are we going to escape? She can't walk.
Give me the sword. I can make it.
Chloe awkwardly tried to rise to her feet. Lyle looked like he wanted to tell her to sit back down, but the words seemed to die in his throat. "I'll clear a path for you two and try to lure them away," I said, picking my reaper stick up and heading towards the door.
Otis?
Chloe blindly called out to me in the direction of my footsteps.
Thank you.
Aw, shucks. Anything for a girl with beautiful eyes. I threw the door open and hurled myself outside with the force of a linebacker colliding with his smaller opponent. A fire had started amongst the lower branches of the tree, and while the noise and smoke had started to draw the attention of a handful of jackals, most were still gathered around the restroom door like a Kardashian was about to get naked. I crushed the face of one of them under my steel-toed boot, and then swung my hockey stick scythe in a wide arc, taking out 2 more of them. I shoved my way past a couple more and took off sprinting across the park. One of them tried to grab hold of me as I ran, but a well-played elbow to the face managed to shake him off. A few of them started howling and snarling as they took off after me. I didn't glance backwards to see if the kids had taken advantage of my heroic charge to escape. I decided to shake off as many more jackals as I could and circle back to regroup with them if I could. I leapt over a park bench and landed with a heavy thump down on one knee. With a hard sweeping blow, I severed the legs of another wide-eyed monster and cleaved another vertically upwards through the chest. Another jackal built like a train charged me. This one had to have been a bouncer at a UFC club in his former life. I couldn't bring the blade of my scythe around fast enough, so I jabbed the blunt end as hard as I could into his wide-open mouth. The temporary blindness those few moments bought me were enough to plant my reaper blade into his gut. I sprinted in a wide circle around the park. Yes, I'm aware sprinting in steel-toed boots is as difficult as it is miserable, and with a quick leap stepped off the handrail of a walkway and onto the roof of a gazebo. My hands were slippery with blood, so I wiped them off on my jeans, which wasn't a tragedy as they already looked like a Jackson Pollock painting, and scanned the park quickly in every direction. Lyle was blindfolded and being led awkwardly by Chloe out of the park and back into the street. She was staggering uncomfortably, literally using her feet and toes to read the terrain beneath her while she hacked at whatever grabbed her with her sword. The blind was literally leading the blind, as Lyle was forced to hold onto the back of Chloe's belt with both hands, as at least a dozen jackals swarmed around them. They weren't going to make it. Chloe was going to collapse long before they got to the shelter at the hospital. I sighed and cracked my neck. Let's see if the Grim Reaper can cheat death. I leapt from the gazebo roof and plowed through 3 more jackals. One of them clawed at me with long, jagged fingernails as I broke free. I hacked through the glass-eyed field of wheat as I ran towards the kids, painting the road with their blood in every direction. Up ahead, Chloe called out in pain as another contraction hit her and she fell to her knees. Lyle wrenched the blindfold off and grabbed the sword from her, blindly swinging the Japanese blade around him as he were trying to swat a fly. The jackals surrounded them in a tight circle, but kept out of reach of the sword. I'm not sure if he did it deliberately. Maybe it was just reflexively. Maybe he wanted to look at Chloe one last time. Belial opened his eyes and looked right into the face of a wizened, white-haired jackal. His face went expressionless, and his jaw went slack, and he dropped the sword without making a sound. Chloe screamed for him to answer her, but it was already too late. Lyle was gone, erased, rebooted, and his eyes would never close again. I broke through the circle of jackals and knocked Lyle and several others to the ground. Dropping my reaper stick, I picked up Chloe and ran as hard as I could. She sobbed uncontrollably in my arms, knowing, without me having to say anything, what was happening and why Lyle wasn't responding. The jackals ran after us like we were sponsoring a marathon, keeping close, yet just out of reach. So I couldn't just spin around quickly and headbutt one of them into the pavement. Chloe was a small girl, but she got heavy real quick, and after a few moments of my sprint became a jog and then a brisk walk. I turned a corner and set her down upon her feet. You have to go the rest of the way on your own. I can see the hospital from here. It's about 100 yards away. A straight shot. Just keep walking, and once you hit the door, keep pounding until someone lets you in. I'll hold them off for as long as I can.
You can't leave me, Otis. I won't make it without you.
Without me is the only way you're going to make it, I reassured her. Thanks for giving me a reason to ride out the apocalypse. I winked. Even though she couldn't see it, I patted her shoulder and she began to hobble in the direction of the emergency room doors. I spun around to face the jackal horde. There were at least 30 of them staring at me, with more heading my way. Kicking off my boots, I quickly placed them over my fists like boxing gloves. Who's first? I chuckled, and launched myself into the crowd. I'd like to say I fought my way through them, that they didn't overpower me and tear the welder's goggles off, but this is an apocalypse story after all, and nothing ever ends well. One thing I can tell you is one of the last things I saw were 2 people in white coats helping Chloe through the hospital doors. Frankly, that's a happy enough ending for me. I'd like to think that's what made the last several years of my misery worth it, and that my brother would be proud. Now, fuck off, and go be a hero to someone. This Grim Reaper's wandering days are over. He looked into the mirror, saw his reflection, and smiled.